All right, again, hi everybody, good afternoon. Thank you for joining for today's info session for the Roster Artist Interest Forum. My name is Sarah Lewis. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the Program Director for Performing Arts and the Accessibility Coordinator at Mid-Atlantic Arts. I'm a white woman with very short brown hair. For a visual description, I'm wearing a gray sweater, tank top, vest, and I'm in my home located on lands known as Baltimore, Maryland. I want to acknowledge the enduring presence of the Piscataway and Susquehannock peoples as historic stewards of this land, as well as the Piscataway, Lumbee, and Eastern Band of Cherokee community members in Baltimore City today. I'm glad that you joined us today for the Mid-Atlantic Tour's Roster Artist Interest Forum information session. I'm here with my colleague, Sarah Tunay, who is the Program Associate at Mid-Atlantic Arts. And today I'm going to share information about Mid-Atlantic Tours, focusing on the Roster Artist Interest Form, which is a relatively new component of this program, allowing artists to express interest in being considered for the Mid-Atlantic Tours roster. This information session is meant to serve as an overview and a resource, but before submitting to the interest form, I would encourage you to review the Roster Artist Interest Form overview, which you can find at midatlanticarts.org. You can also reach out to me with any questions about the overview at any time. My email is slewis@midatlanticarts.org, and we'll share it in the chat here and a few times throughout this presentation. So some housekeeping for today. I have about 20 minutes of information to share with you, and then we will move into questions and answers. To ask a question, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A will occur at the end of the webinar, but I encourage you to go ahead and populate that Q&A box with questions as you go, and we will get to them at the end. I also want to share that we have live captions for today's webinar. And so to turn those on, go ahead and go to the control bar on your Zoom screen, select more, and then select show captions. Throughout your process with the Roster Artist Interest Form, if you're in need of accommodation, please contact me, Sarah Lewis, at 410-539-6656, extension 110, or you can email slewis@midatlanticarts.org. Before we get started discussing the Roster Artist Interest Form and the Mid-Atlantic Tours program, I want to share a bit about Mid-Atlantic Arts. Mid-Atlantic Arts supports artists, presenters, and organizations through unique programming, grant support, partnerships, and information sharing. The organization was founded in 1979, and it is aligned with the 6 regional arts organizations, as well as the National Endowment for the Arts. We combine state and federal funding with private support from corporations, foundations, and individuals to nurture the diverse artistic expression inside of our region and beyond. You can learn more about Mid-Atlantic Arts and our work at midatlanticarts.org, and all about all the regional arts organizations, or RAOs, at the RAO website, usregionalarts.org. And we'll put both those links in the chat now. Now let's jump into Mid-Atlantic Tours. Before we talk about the Roster Artist Interest Form itself, I will share a little bit about the program. Mid-Atlantic Tours is a grant opportunity for presenters in Mid-Atlantic Arts geographic region. That region includes Delaware, the District of Columbia, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico, the US Virgin Islands, Virginia, West Virginia, and the native nations that share this geography. Mid-Atlantic Tours is funded through the NEA's regional touring program, and it supports robust touring of the selected roster artists throughout the Mid-Atlantic geographic region, with at least 2 engagement activities at each presenter's community. What we're here to talk about today is how an artist can express interest in being considered for the roster through the Roster Artist Interest Form. The fiscal year we're discussing here today is FY26, which runs from July 2025 through June 30th, 2026. Artists interested in being considered for the FY26 roster must be open to touring during that window, and we'll talk more about that in the criteria section. For any presenters on the call, the finalized FY26 Mid-Atlantic Tours guidelines will be released with the finalized artist roster in late fall of 2024. You're welcome to reach out to me with any presenter-focused questions via email, but keep in mind that we will hold a separate webinar focused on the presenter side of this program in this fall. Today, we're going to focus on the roster artist interest form submission. Both prospective Mid-Atlantic Tours roster artists and presenters interested in the program can review the guidelines from the past year's Mid-Atlantic Tours cycle for reference. Those are available at midatlanticarts.org, and the link for that is going in the chat. Keep in mind, though, that these guidelines might adjust slightly for FY26, so check the website in in fall of 24 for the most up-to-date FY26 guidelines. So if selected for the Mid-Atlantic Tours roster, artists work with tour managers and presenters to plan at least 2 engagement activities at each venue. At least one of those 2 engagement activities must include a performance or performative component of at least 30 minutes that is open to the public. It can be ticketed or free. The performance can be repeated multiple times during the engagement or performed just once. And now that you've heard a little bit more about the Mid-Atlantic Tours program in general, we'll get started with what we're really here today to discuss, which is the process for submitting to the roster artist interest form. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the form is a relatively new component of this program. This is the 3rd year that we've offered it as an option for artists to indicate their interest in being considered for the program. In the past, the roster was assembled internally by Mid-Atlantic Arts staff in direct conversation with potential roster artists. The interest form was developed to create a transparent process by which artists and their agents or managers could express interest in being included on the roster for future fiscal years. It's important to note that the roster artist interest form is not a grant application. Selection to the Mid-Atlantic Tours roster does not constitute a grant from Mid-Atlantic Arts, and there is no financial exchange between the artists included on the roster and Mid-Atlantic Arts. Rather, artists selected for the roster will work with a tour manager and Mid-Atlantic Arts staff to determine subsidy awards that are made directly to performing arts presenters in the region during the project period. So said another way, if you are a Mid-Atlantic Tours roster artist, presenters in the Mid-Atlantic Arts program region can receive up to 50% subsidy towards your artist fee if you engage with that presenter during the project period. So now we're going to talk about the criteria to be considered for a roster artist. To be included on the roster, a performing artist working in circus, dance, folk and traditional performing arts, multidisciplinary performance, music, puppetry, or theater can submit. The artist must be based in the Mid-Atlantic geographic region that's listed here on screen. They must be ready to tour a complete in-person or virtual performance work, concert, or short-form evening of no less than 30 minutes, plus at least one additional community engagement activity between July 1st, 2025 and June 30, 2026. This is the project period. Finally, the roster artist must have a tour manager working with them, or they must have direct experience booking and managing their own tours. If an artist is interested in self-managing and booking their own tour, we will ask for references to share if you are being seriously considered for the roster. So who should complete the interest form? You can fill out this form if you are an artist meeting all the criteria I just described, if you're an agent or a manager representing an artist that meets that criteria, or if you are a presenter, a performing arts presenter in the region who has an artist in mind that you think would be a great fit for this program, and you've received their consent to submit on their behalf. I want to talk a little bit about the scope and scale of what we have to offer for this program. For FY25, the budget allocated for each artist on the roster that could be allocated directly to presenters to support their tour was $20,000 per roster artist. And we haven't set the budget for FY26 yet, but I share the FY25 figure with you to give you a sense of what this program can support. The presenter can receive up to 50% of the artist fee, as I mentioned. So projects working on a larger budgetary scale, a larger scale in general, may only be able to support a few presenters through this program, which could be okay, but smaller scale projects may be able to tour more widely with support through the program. That's not to say that as an artist, you should downplay your costs by any means. You should indicate the actual costs of your touring project. Just keep in mind that to accommodate presenters with smaller budgets, we do try to focus on projects touring on a smaller scale for this program, and projects with artist fees over $15,000 per presenter will not be considered for this program. So the selection process. I want to share that concurrent with the open submission process that we're talking about now, a group of curatorial advisors has been identified. These folks are peer curators, artists, presenters, and agents from the Mid-Atlantic region, and they've been asked to recommend artists to Mid-Atlantic Arts to invite to submit to this interest form. So that's happening now, along with the open submission process. And once an artist has submitted to the interest form, these are the next steps to being considered. First, Mid-Atlantic Arts staff reviews submissions for eligibility and makes shortlist recommendations. Next, the curatorial advisement panel reviews a shortlist of submissions based on selection priorities, which we'll talk about in a minute, and makes recommendations for the presenter interest survey. Then in late summer, early fall, Mid-Atlantic Arts will send out a presenter interest survey to performing arts presenters in the region that will allow presenters to indicate their interest and excitement about artists who are being seriously considered for the roster. With that feedback, the final roster is assembled by Mid-Atlantic Arts staff. So now I want to share a bit about the selection priorities for the program. These priorities will be shared with the curatorial advisement panel as well, and will be used by Mid-Atlantic Arts staff when making curatorial decisions. First, projects recommended for submission by the curatorial advisors will receive priority consideration for selection. Projects showing a success, a history of touring success, like feasibility and presenter interest. So that includes, does the artist have a history of touring? Or do they demonstrate preparedness for their first tour? Do you have a plan to engage with a tour manager? And how do presenters respond to the artist in the presenter interest survey? I want to note that it's not a deal breaker if an artist has never toured, but it is considered as part of the selection process. Next, broad representation of multiple performance genres. The roster will feature 6 artists or companies total, and we certainly cannot feature every genre and form of performing arts across a span of 6 artists, but we do want to make sure we're covering a wide range. Next, broad geographic representation from artists based in different states and jurisdictions across the Mid-Atlantic region will be considered. Finally, we want to prioritize artists and creators who are actively engaged with diverse communities to engage the transformative power of the arts. So this language comes directly from Mid-Atlantic Arts' organizational vision. And through Mid-Atlantic Tours, we want to engage artists whose practice connects them to people and communities, whether those communities are defined geographically or by identity or both. There are so many ways for this to look. And as artists, you are likely doing this work every day. And we just want to understand, better how you're doing that and, what communities you're connecting with. And we do ask a question in the interest form about where and with whom you'd like to connect if you were to be selected through for a roster artist. So if you want to talk further about that or have any questions about what that looks like, feel free to put it in the chat or reach out to me directly. So next, we have some deadlines and important dates here. The deadline for submitting to the roster artist interest form is June 24th, 2024. In July, we will be bringing the curatorial advisement panel together to review the short list of submissions and make finalist recommendations. In September, the presenter interest survey will be distributed to performing arts presenters in the Mid-Atlantic region. And in October, artists and artist managers will be contracted for the 2025-2026 Mid-Atlantic Tours roster. Here are the dates for artists who are selected for the roster. In fall of 2024, we'll have a public announcement of the roster. March 27th of 2025 will be the booking deadline for presenters in the region to contract with roster artists. And as I've mentioned before, the project period for roster artists and presenters engaging with them will be July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. So again, this is the last informational slide I have for you today. I want to stop here and I'm going to adjust my screen share to show you the interest form itself. That way you can have a sense of what it looks like. After that, I'll jump into the questions that you've put in the chat, but feel free to go ahead and start populating. I see we have a few in there already. Keep adding your questions to the Q&A. So here we go. Let me share the screen one more time to show you the interest form itself. Just a moment. So here we are looking at the roster artist interest form. It is a Microsoft form. So if you're familiar with Google Forms, it works very similarly to that. We have an overview here of the program description, but again, I do recommend that you review the roster artist interest form overview document, which is available on our website that has all the details about submitting and eligibility for the program. So in the form, we ask, who are you? Who's submitting? Are you an artist? Are you representing an artist, or are you a presenter? It asks for the artist name, lead contact name, contact email and phone number, which state or jurisdiction in the region is your artist, is the artist or company based. If you're based in multiple states or jurisdictions, please go ahead and select where the majority of artists are based. And we get this question sometimes: if some members of an ensemble are not based in the region, is the project still eligible? The most competitive projects will have artists fully based in the region, but if the majority of artists in your ensemble are based in the region, you are still welcome and invited to submit. We ask for the genre of performance, the bio for the artist or company, your web presence, your plan for engaging a tour manager, the fee range. This is an estimate. We'll be in touch with you to get more into the nitty-gritty of this if you're identified as a finalist for the program. The engagement activities that the roster artist would be presenting, as well as the communities, geographic and or identity-based communities in the Mid-Atlantic region where you would like to tour and bring your work. And then one required work sample and one optional work sample here. So that is the interest form. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and get into the Q&A here because I see that we have some questions in there. So thank you all so much for being here. I do want to share that this recording is going to be available on Mid-Atlantic Art's website. So if you have any need to revisit it, check back next week. You can also reach out to me anytime. We can chat. through any questions that you have if they don't end up answered here. So I'm going to start with this first question here. Hillary Marie asks, is a higher value placed on artists nominated by the presenters? No, presenter nominations don't carry more weight than any other nominations. Where we do have a preference, or a higher priority is when a curatorial advisor that we've identified recommends an artist. The curatorial advisor role is to help us broaden the scope and reach of this interest form to make sure we're getting to all different types of artists in the region, so that the curatorial advisor recommendations do carry a bit more weight. But a presenter submitting a form does not carry more weight than an artist. Could a museum be considered as a presenter? So if you are interested in being considered, in being a presenter for this program, if your organization has 501c3 status, it very likely can be considered. And we can chat more about that via email or a phone call. So reach out to me if you want to get more into the details. I also encourage you to check out the guidelines for the FY25 cycle, which are available on the website and have in-depth eligibility overview for presenters that may answer your question. Could music ensembles such as duos and trios apply? Absolutely. This is a roster program that features individual artists sometimes, but it also features ensembles. So I would recommend that you check out our website where you can see the current roster artists that are touring through this program in the current cycle. And that'll give you a sense of the types of artists who are sometimes on the roster. We have a question here. I'm sure it varies, but on average, how many artists are you choosing from each cycle? There will be 6 artists on the roster for FY26. I should clarify that there will be 6 artists on the roster chosen through this selection process. We do have some exciting internal programmatic collaboration happening at Mid-Atlantic Arts. So when the final Mid-Atlantic Tours roster is announced, you may see additional artists that are brought into the program through a partner program that is going to be working together with Mid-Atlantic Tours. But in terms of the selection process for this roster artist interest form, there will be 6 artists selected through this process. Is there a secondary listing or a roster for artists who are not chosen to be one of the 6? A place where other presenters can discover artists who will be touring in FY26? Eric, this is an amazing question and something that I am interested in and thinking about, but it's not something we have in place quite yet. Stay tuned. Also wondering if ensembles with performers from different nationalities could apply, given that half of the ensemble is a US citizen. Yeah, absolutely. The geographic component asks that the artists be based in the Mid-Atlantic region, but if you are from if the artists have different nationalities but are working out of one of the 10 states or jurisdictions in the Mid